Tuesday, September 29th, 2015, was a busy day on board the container ship El Faro as the crew of 33 mariners finished their final preparations for sea. As with most ships, the time in port would have been quite busy, with the ship having arrived from its previous trip just the day before. The cargo needed to be unloaded and the new containers and cargo loaded and lashed down. They would have been rushing to meet their normal underway time of 7 p.m. Like the crew of Santa Fe, the crew of El Faro was a can-do bunch. It was the height of hurricane season, but the seas were calm in Jacksonville, Florida. Presently, the ship, over 2 football fields in length, would traverse the familiar 1,300-mile stretch directly from the northeast corner of Florida to San Juan on the island of Puerto Rico. In fact, the 40-year-old El Faro had originally been called to Puerto Rico when it started its life making runs between America's east coast and the small U.S. island territory. At 8:06 p.m., El Faro set sail. Directly in its path on the Atlantic side of the Bahamas, Tropical Storm Joaquin was strengthening. The next morning, as El Faro made its way southeast, meteorologists upgraded Joaquin to a Category 1 hurricane and issued a hurricane warning for the central Bahamas. By the end of the day, Joaquin would be classified a Category 3, capable of devastating damage, with winds of 129 miles per hour or more. Hurricane Joaquin would end up being the strongest hurricane to hit the Bahamas since 1866. Prior to the ship setting for sea, an off-duty El Faro officer texted the captain to make sure he was aware of the storm and asking about his intended route. The captain replied that he planned to take the normal, direct route to Puerto Rico. Being the most direct, El Faro's chosen route was the fastest, but also the most exposed to the hurricane. An alternate route, the Old Bahama Channel, was 160 miles longer and would take the ship an extra 8 hours to traverse. But this route would have put the Bahamas between the ship and the storm, buffering the vessel from the wind and waves. You don't need experience in maritime navigation to understand the choice facing the captain and crew of El Faro. Once you've departed Jacksonville en route south to Puerto Rico, you only have 2 opportunities to cross over to the protected channel. At the north end of the Bahamas, where you turn right and follow the Florida coastline, or farther down the Atlantic side of the Bahamas at the halfway point near an island called Rum Cay. At this point, there is a wide channel that cuts through the Bahamas. Once you pass that second turn at Rum Cay, you've committed yourself to the direct path and to facing the full brunt of anything blowing in from the east. But the captain seems to have already made that decision by himself, without discussion with his team prior to getting underway. At its current speed, El Faro would reach the first turning point at 7 o'clock Wednesday morning, the second decision point at 1 o'clock Thursday morning. This chapter is about the power of our programmed language, rooted in the industrial age playbook. It uses the example of an ocean-going vessel facing a hurricane, but it could be about any team working on any big project. What makes El Faro worth discussing is that we have the records of the actual words spoken and the actual actions taken by the captain and crew. This gives an unparalleled glimpse into the language a team actually used when faced with life and death decisions. This was a familiar route for the captain and crew of El Faro. They made the trip both ways on a regular basis and knew it inside and out. In other words, navigating from Jacksonville to San Juan was a classic nose-to-the-grindstone task for everyone on board. In a situation like this, every member of the crew knew exactly what to do and when to do it. Then, the situation changed. When Alfaro left port, Joaquin was classified as a tropical storm. It was approaching from the central Atlantic, expected to turn to the right somewhere near the Bahamas. Alfaro's Atlantic route would then take her down the back side of the storm, the gentler side. If Joaquin turned late, however, Alfaro would cross the front of the storm, where the forward motion of the hurricane would drive stronger winds and larger waves. Once Alfaro took the Atlantic route, she wouldn't be able to cross over to the protected Old Bahama Channel until Rum Cay. Experienced mariners know this, and these were experienced mariners. The captain had been a master for 10 years, and the officers and crew had met all Coast Guard and International Maritime Organization requirements and regulations. Technical competence was not a problem.